Hi, Alba.
Hi, Lamia. Nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for taking part in the interview today. I'm really pleased to have you on the screen.
Oh, my pleasure.
I wonder if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your professional and personal background.
Absolutely. I'm originally from California, but I moved to Vancouver, Canada about 25 years ago, and I'm married to Mike, who is a fifth generation Canadian, which in those parts of the world goes way back. Um, I've been traveling all my life, as has Mike as well, but we had become pretty stable in the sense that we were both in the computer industry for 30 years, and we had a lovely home in Greater Vancouver. We have three children, and we traveled quite a bit with the kids and on our own. But the day came really when we wanted to do more than that. So we kind of progressed to a point where now I'm in my 60s, Mike is in his 50s, and we felt very satisfied with what we had achieved in a corporate world, but wanted to take a little time for ourselves, really. And that really happened. The pivotal moment for us was that we have three kids who had all finished their university degrees, their bachelor degrees, and we kind of felt we'd done the heavy lifting with parenting. We knew there would still be more things that we'd been involved with, but I think that is a big goalpost for a lot of people such as ourselves.
Well, that's wonderful. So, in terms of life experience, it sounds like you've had very rich lives in Canada together, and you've certainly done a lot of corporate travel, which I know certainly I enjoyed over the years. But what is it about the travel that house sitting offers you that you think is quite unique? Is there anything special you can share with us?
Yeah, I think originally we came to house sitting, if I can just touch on that, um, from the other side. We have three kids, but at this one particular year when we wanted to take our annual big trip, we usually did a 25-day trip together. One kid was studying in Switzerland, one had just moved in with her boyfriend, and one was living at the dorms. And suddenly we had nobody to take care of our home and our pets. And a friend recommended house sitters. And to be honest, the idea of having house sitters, people we didn't know personally, coming into our home was a little intimidating. And so it took a little conversation with the people who had done it several times to convince us to try it. And we had a fantastic experience. People who sat for us in our home, we discovered that there was a great sense of security and feeling confident that, if something happened at the house, there was someone there, that our pets were able to stay in their own home and in their own environment. And so we really appreciated it from that perspective. Really, the reason we started doing house sitting was not because we thought, oh, what a cool lifestyle or what a great thing to try. We started it because after having sitters for ourselves, we thought, well, wait a second, this is a great idea. You get to stay in someone else's home in another area and experience that lifestyle. So we decided that we wanted to try it. We really didn't come to it from the perspective of what does house sitting add to travel. We came from the perspective of, gee, this is a great thing for us as homeowners and as pet owners. So it really wasn't, the attraction started out being the other way around.
Well, that's actually very interesting. So you found the benefits as a homeowner. You entrusted your property and your pets to somebody you didn't know. You worked with whatever system you were working with then, and actually it helped you out, and especially on a long trip. I know it can be expensive to get pet sitters in or use kennels, so it must have actually been quite an inexpensive way to manage the situation you're in.
That was actually the pivotal thing, because when a friend told me, oh, we use house sitters, I thought, oh, this sounds like a good idea. And I broached it with Mike, my husband, and his immediate knee-jerk reaction was, I don't want to have strangers in our home with our animals. And I said, and this is a few years ago, I said, well, that's fine. it'll cost us $2,000 to kennel the dog and the cat, and then we'll have to pay someone to come by the house occasionally. So, and then at that point he said, well, I'm willing to talk about this house sitter thing. So I still tease him about that. Yeah, he really hit the brakes and then eased off of them a little bit. So yes, absolutely. As a homeowner, uh, there's an insurance aspect as well, that insurance companies are not wild about you leaving your house empty, not just from a theft point of view, but from, if something happens in the house, an electrical problem or a water problem or whatever might happen, there's a huge sense on a personal level of being reassured, but also a financial one of not having to pay for the pets being taken care of, or for the house being looked after.
We find that some of our homeowners, with the money they save from traditional means of pet and home care, actually go on another holiday each year just because they can afford to. They've saved the £2,000 or £3,000 or dollars and use that to good end to see somewhere else in the world.
That actually has happened with us, in the sense that not so much that we've done another trip, is that it's just meant, hold on a second, Mike? Yeah. It's just meant that we could extend a trip. So our typical time for doing a trip was 25 days. We would fly out on a Friday evening or Saturday morning, and we would come back a Sunday or a Monday. And it was usually 23 days in a location with 2 days of travel. And once we started doing this, it suddenly became, because we also decided to take a leave of absence from work, it was, well, why wouldn't we stay longer? Because if we could do those same 3+ weeks of hotels or Airbnbs or whatever it might be, and then tack on a week or 2 weeks of a house sit. And that was what our very first plan was. Our very first plan was exactly that. Well, let's see if we can extend a trip by doing this, if we find a sit somewhere we would like to spend a little bit of time.
And what was the crossover point that you decided, actually, let's try it? Let's try house sitting. What was the prompt, do you think, to take you into the world of a house sitter?
Well, as I mentioned before, we have 3 kids, but all graduated university, and we decided to take a gap year, a professional gap year. We both took leave of absence from our work. We asked to be able to take a year off, and we were both granted that. And so we leased out our house when the third and last kid had moved out. All 3 were properly launched, had jobs, had finished their university degrees. And so we had this gap year, and we thought, well, let's see if this house sitting can extend our experience. So we wanted to test drive it because we weren't really sure we would be comfortable doing it. So the way we test drove it was that we contacted somebody who needed a house sitter in our same town. And I know that sounds absurd, but we wanted, to be able to go back home, and we were actually still working at that point. We hadn't quite finished. And the first person we sat for was confused, because she said, I don't understand. You live here. And we explained we wanted to test drive this idea out. She was very kind. She says, oh, that sounds great. So she did that. And we actually really enjoyed meeting her and her significant other. And they're now good friends of ours. And we decided, yeah, we can do this. So we signed up for 2 assignments in Europe, one in France and one in Ireland, I think, I forget, and took off on our adventure, and actually discovered, and you were very kind, the very first sit we ever did in Europe was through you. You suggested we contact this woman in Spain when we were actually in Turkey, and we thought, okay, let's try it. Fingers crossed. Who knows what this is going to be like? And turned out to be wonderful, absolutely wonderful. We really enjoyed it, and that was the beginning of that adventure. Was little baby step close to where we live, and then, to be honest, your hand holding was huge. And speaking of hand holding, here's my significant other, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Lamia.
So I've given Lamia a little bit of a background about our experience and how we started using sitters and how we got into it in our professional lives. And we were just at this point where Lamia was saying what was the catalyst. And for us, the catalyst was, I think, threefold. One was having had people sit for us, we realized the value of what it was, and that it's a true win-win situation. That's really the key for us. We really love the opportunity of exploring an area with the advantage of doing a sit. We recognize the value of what we're doing for a homeowner, having been the homeowners, and we understand because of that why it works so well for both sides.
That's wonderful. You mentioned on a few occasions that you started on a grey gap year. May I call it that, a grey gap year? We hear about this more and more. Certainly, we have mature professionals leaving work just for a little while, and they come across my desk all the time. I get to meet them, and then they say, "You know what? It was so hard to go back. We decided not to do that." What's happening with you? Are you still on an extended grey gap year, or are you thinking of alternative routes?
Well, it was kind of a funny thing because, as fate would have it, 6 months into our year, we were in Monovasia, which is on the Peloponnesian Peninsula in Greece, enjoying life. And we got an email from the people who were leasing our home saying, "Oops, can't pay the rent." And so we had to come back early. And Mike did, in fact, go back to work. Well, he went in for a meeting,
Yeah.
agreed to a contract to go back. And on the very first day of that contract, or the meeting about the contract, came back and said, "I didn't get my year. I wanted my year." And I said, "Okay, so what?" And he said, "Well, I've committed to this contract, but I think when the contract's done, I don't want to go back full
We need to
time."
keep going. Yeah.
And here's the really bizarre thing. Somebody literally walked by our house and was a real estate agent and wanted to buy our house. And 24 hours later, we had sold our house.
Good Lord. So it was meant to be. You are meant to be on the road for a while.
It did, but the result of that, even if we had not done that, we wanted to go back to doing our full year of gap year. But as you say, once you've had this experience, it's very difficult to go back because nothing is promised to anyone.
That was in 2016, so no, we haven't gone back yet.
No.
Mike is good at cutting to the chase. Yeah, 4 years later, we're still on our
We're
gap
still doing
year.
this, yeah.
I think we should just call it a grey gap, actually. I
Yeah.
like that. The extendable, the elastic grey gap.
Or the great gray gap.
Now that's even better. I think the great gap is even better. Yes, the great escape.
Yeah, that's the best one, the great escape.
Yeah.
So yeah, and doing the house sitting has meant
Turn the board.
sorry. Doing the house sitting has meant that we have that flexibility to say, well, we'll rent a place here for a while, or we'll take a sit there for a while, or we'll just do regular tourism for a while. And I think the first 6 months when we were just on a regular gap gave us the confidence to what we call step off the cliff. So it was the first 6 months of that gap year of doing some sits, doing some regular travel, doing some short-term rentals that made us realize, the possibilities are endless.
And have you traveled anywhere where you've both agreed, gosh, this is fantastic? We'd probably like to stay here a bit longer. Is there anywhere in the world that has called you like that?
Unfortunately, many places.
Yeah, there are many places we'd like to go back to. London is one of them, and we're here right now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we're in London now, and we've come to London several times over the last few years. Luckily, several times with sets, not always with sets, but often. We spend a lot of time in the south of France, which we absolutely love. And fortunately, as you know, the UK and France and Spain, which are three of our favorite places to spend time in, are very rich with house sitting opportunities.
Mhm.
Yes, it's actually they're all three countries that we do find come fairly easily in terms of opportunities, and that's fabulous, you know. And the people travel between them as well. So we have house sitters and homeowners who swap around, which is excellent.
Yeah, we've actually made quite a few friends doing this, which is really wonderful. Many of the people that we've sat for have become friends of ours, and um, we're happy that they often say to us, "We're thinking of another trip. So when would you be coming back this way?" So that's one of the real pleasures. In fact, it's one of the biggest pleasures of doing house sitting is getting to meet extraordinary people, because frankly, it is not, um, I don't know how to put this. It is extraordinary people who choose to do this on both sides of the equation. You have to be fairly imaginative,
Open-minded.
open-minded, a little creative in your thinking to go down this path, I think. And it just doing it just furthers that. And several of the people we've sat for have been very curious about it and have said that they themselves want to try it as well.
Mhm.
It is very, very addictive, I think. I mean, I house sit myself and I have house sitters in my own home. And I have to say, it's just the experience of you're kind of on their journey too. And that's really fun. Or if you're the house sitter, sharing your journey and learning what makes people tick and understanding the homes and environments they've created for themselves. It's really kind of a living novel, I think.
Well, we like to call it test driving other people's lives. We've done a test drive of a beautiful home in the Canaries and of
Estepona.
Estepona, of Vera. We've done a test drive of a gorgeous mansion in France and a little townhouse and a cottage in the hills of Italy, all over the UK, Ireland. So it's a huge part of what makes this fun is instead of just checking into a hotel or getting an Airbnb, really being in a neighborhood. But
Yeah.
today we walked up to
Highgate
um,
Village.
the Flask, which is a pub in Highgate, and a beautiful walk up there, and the pub was gorgeous. Nowhere we ever would have found as tourists in London.
No, and everybody that lives in this neighborhood knows about it. I'm sure they all know about all of the pubs within, a mile or a mile and a half of where we are. But a tourist would never know about it. So we're clearly going to places that the locals go,
Yeah.
and it's nice to like you say live their life, right?
Yeah. And another thing we haven't really touched on, not all the sit opportunities involve pets, but usually they do. And as people who've had pets, it's actually one of the pleasures of doing this is getting to, in the evening, like right now, we have Flora here, in the evening, having a beautiful little puppy or a kitty come and want to cuddle with you. It makes it very homey. And it people who only travel using hotels often ask me, but how can you go for so long? It's exhausting. It isn't exhausting when you're doing a house sit. When you're doing a house sit, you have the comfort of a home, including a pet on loan. So it's really one of the advantages.
It's regenerative by the sounds of it. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. It's wonderful to hear your stories.
Mhm.
Is there anywhere that you have yet to discover in the world by house sitting? It sounds like you've been all over Europe and certainly in Canada, but is there anywhere you really kind of have a hankering to go and visit by house sitting?
Well, we have not done any house sits in Asia. We have gone to Asia quite a bit. We've done quite a bit of travel in Asia, but we haven't done a sit there. We haven't. We've done one sit in Scandinavia, which was quite nice. We did one in Copenhagen. Um, I know that there are some in Turkey. Different areas. I guess.
I think the thing with it is you don't really look at the opportunities unless you're open to it at the time. So when we start traveling, for example, last year we took 2 3 or 4 month trips, and we're at the end of this particular one. And the beauty is coming to a place like London, for example, and spending, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe, it might be the catalyst and the reason that we buy the airplane tickets in the first place. And then when we're here, we can look to anywhere, and it's a much more reasonable flight than it would be for us to travel to, some of these places from Vancouver. And we find it very easy to say, okay, well, let's take a chance and go to, this place we've never been to before and see what that's like. It's somewhat about tourism. It's, but it's really exploring and going to places we haven't been, and, learning the, sort of the ways of that little village or little town or something like that. So
there have been a few times when we've done a sit specifically because it was, well, I'd like to explore that place, but I'm not sure that if I had to put out, a couple $1,000, pounds, whatever, to make the trip, that I would go there. But with the sit, it's why not try it out? And often those have been our experiences that we've enjoyed the most, so it frees you up from making it always about, oh, but is this giving a value to going to a place that's only monetary, and it takes that piece of it, it diminishes that piece of the equation.
Like traveling from Spain to France, for example, we've gone from what's the Costa Brava, the northern part of Spain, into France. And we drove through a few years back, we drove through a town called Collioure and Port Vendres, and that area along the coast. And we loved Collioure and stayed a night in Port Vendres, but didn't really think about it too much. Even though we walked around a little bit, we didn't really get the sense of the town. We took a sit in Port Vendres at the beginning of January this year, and we spent 10 days, 12 days,
10 days,
and absolutely beautiful. Oh. It was a fishing port, less touristy than Collioure, which is a 25-minute walk away, and people would not normally go there as a tourist, but when you're there as a sit, you get to really enjoy things that most people would never ever see.
And if anybody were going
and
there,
I would now live there. If I was going to live in a place, I'd live there instead of Collioure.
That's what we discovered, that Collioure is the big tourism attraction, and it's gorgeous. But in fact, if you were going to spend a week in either town, I'd tell people go to Port Vendres now that we know both towns better. And that often happens because a sit may be in the less obvious town, and yet it ends up being the more pleasurable place to be.
So by discovering it on foot, literally walking around, knowing its sort of nooks and crannies, the alleyways, the shops, the places to eat and have a coffee, that kind of thing, you kind of live it and just enjoy it, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's really, really fascinating. Thank you so much for giving us some time today. It's been really interesting learning about how you came into it as homeowners first and then as house sitters. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, our pleasure. And thank you, Lamia, for being such a great hands-on person. You really know what you're doing, and we really appreciate the help you've given us.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Happy house sitting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.